Until now, high-profile drug scandals have been rare in tennis.
I made a huge mistake.
Maria Sharapova, the Russian superstar, was banned for 2 years in 2016.
Ich stehe unter Verdacht, bei den englischen Meisterschaften von Wimbledon mit Kokain gedopt zu haben.
Former world number one Martina Hingis a decade earlier. Before that, hardly anyone got caught.
The talk of who might be, who might not be is irresponsible.
Andre Agassi, probably most famously testing positive for crystal meth, and no one knew about it until he wrote about it in his own autobiography decades later.
And here it's Luz.
We weren't even doing essentially drug testing early on in the sort of early 90s, late 80s when I started on tour. And then all of a sudden it became an Olympic sport. And then it was like, right, every day you have to be accountable.
More recently, doping has become a tennis buzzword. In 2023, former world number one Romanian Simona Halep was given a 4-year doping suspension, which was reduced to 9 months.
Șocată, aș putea să spun, și e o mare nedreptate ce se întâmplă.
This is the scariest moment, I think, for tennis and doping that we've had in the sport's history so far.
In 2024, 2 world number one players returned positive samples under the International Tennis Integrity Agency, or ITIA, which oversees doping and corruption in the sport.
And it's something that I think we have to look into for why this is happening. This really is a crisis to have these 2 top players both test positive, and it needs to find a solution to make it so it's not happening anymore.
Sinner makes history in Turin.
Italian Jannik Sinner, the new king of tennis, has had a breakout 12 months, winning the Australian and US Opens, ATP Finals and Davis Cup. He also twice tested positive to an anabolic steroid.
There is a loss of credibility in the sport at the top levels, that people shouldn't be trusting these top players who are winning the biggest tournaments. And that's the fear with something like this happening right at the top.
Sinner successfully appealed a provisional ban, arguing his physiotherapist cut his finger and sprayed a medicine on it which contained the banned substance clostebol. It was then transferred to Sinner when the physio massaged him.
It's certainly an example that now every single time you might say, guys or ladies, make sure you're not using anything on me or giving me anything that could be testing positive.
While Sinner was cleared of wrongdoing by the ITIA, it's not the end of it. The World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, which oversees all drugs in sport, believes Sinner should be suspended because he is responsible for what his team puts into his body.
I think Jannik Sinner should be serving a suspension, because even though I believe his explanation, you then go into such a grey area.
Leading commentator Matt Keenan has seen it all in professional cycling, a sport more experienced than tennis in dealing with doping scandals.
He's the number one in the world with a lot of resources at his disposal, so he can get the best legal support possible. But what if it was Jannik Sinner that was ranked 202 in the world and doesn't have that economic power behind him to be able to fight the case? Then that person gets suspended, and it needs to be fair for each athlete.
WADA has taken Sinner's case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport for a final ruling and a possible suspension. Responding to WADA's appeal, Jannik Sinner released a statement saying he had nothing to hide. I will cooperate fully with the appeal process and provide whatever may be needed to prove my innocence once again.
I think it's going to be a real challenge for the Australian Open this year from a public perception perspective, and what the audience does, how they respond to Jannik Sinner when he fronts up and they know that after this event has finished, there's going to be an appeal to WADA.
If WADA is successful, then a ban of 1 to 2 years could be imposed by the panel.
Richard Ings was once the boss of Australia's anti-doping watchdog. 20 years ago, he worked in the Men's Tennis Integrity Unit.
These are the rules. This is the thing to remember, that the rules of tennis, the anti-doping rules of tennis, as with other international sports, simply follow the World Anti-Doping Agency code.
The rules have also snared another world number one and winner of 5 Grand Slams, Poland's Iga Swiatek.
Na pewno to jest coś, co zostanie ze mną do końca życia i wymagało...
Swiatek recently served a 1-month ban by the ITIA for testing positive last August to a drug called trimetazidine, or TMZ. Swiatek blamed her ingestion of TMZ on some contaminated melatonin, which she took for jet lag.
For me, it's kind of like, really, do we need to out the player based on such a small, minuscule amount if we can actually find the contamination, which she did immediately, where she realized that it was from her melatonin that she uses quite regularly. So it's like, yes, there are times where you can get a batch that is a little dodgy, and on this occasion, that's what happened.
But Swiatek failed to tell the drug testers she had taken the melatonin. Like Jannik Sinner's case, it may not be the end of the matter. The World Anti-Doping Agency told 730 in a statement it is reviewing the case and reserving the right to appeal, and push for Swiatek to serve a longer ban. Just before Christmas, there was another case. Australian Max Purcell was banned for receiving an intravenous infusion of vitamins above the limit of 100 millilitres. He will miss the Australian Open.
It's back-to-back Grand Slam doubles finals.
Purcell said his breach of anti-doping rules was unintentional and happened at a medical clinic. I pride myself on being an athlete who always makes sure that everything is WADA safe. Defending a positive test isn't a level playing field, and the richer players have an advantage over the lesser lights on tour.
Oh, these two are so fast.
Whilst higher ranked players with means have the ability to get a legal and scientific team to fight these cases, lower ranked players facing this anti-doping juggernaut have absolutely no chance.
The case of British leading doubles player Tara Moore has been used in comparison. The ITIA cleared Moore of cheating, explaining her positive doping test came from contaminated meat, but the fight to clear her name lasted 18 months.
I am of the view that every athlete, whether they're a lower ranked athlete or an elite level athlete, should be afforded the same level of representation in these anti-doping cases.
Nick Kyrgios has been a critic of how big-name players escape harsh penalties when they test positive.
Once you get caught, you can't act like the victim. That's what pisses me off even more. I'm like, hold on a second. You employ your team, don't you?
Well, it's new territory for tennis to have these such high-profile cases. And what was interesting to see recently is Nick Kyrgios has been the voice of reason. And for tennis to see that Nick Kyrgios is the voice of reason, maybe it's not handling the cases all that well.
Kyrgios is coming back from injury to play the Australian Open. Ever the showman, he has no qualms about exploiting the drama around Sinner for his own advantage.
Let's be honest, I just want to go out there and I really want to play Sinner. Like, if I played him in Australian Open, like, I would get every single person in the crowd to just, like, get on him. Like, I would just turn into an absolute riot.
As the Australian Open approaches, organisers will be nervous about how fans are going to react to these doping cases.
We'll really find that out in Australia, I guess, meaningfully when we see both these players having sort of had their full stories out there and how the crowds receive them, especially Jannik Sinner being defending champion in Australia, how much that's a cloud over his defence if he, marches through again.